Did you know Elvis Presley once gave Muhammad Ali a custom-made, jewel-encrusted robe worth thousands before a major fight? Or that the King of Rock and Roll secretly met with President Richard Nixon in the Oval Office, hoping to become a federal agent at large to fight drug culture? And believe it or not, when the Beatles finally met their idol, Elvis, the encounter started in awkward silence because the Fab Four were too starstruck to speak. Number 12. When the King Met Margaret in Paradise. Elvis Presley loved Hawaii. It was more than just a filming location for hits like Blue Hawaii, Girls, 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 and Paradise, Hawaiian Style. It was a place he genuinely seemed to find peace, away from the constant frenzy of his life. He vacationed there often, and famously, his groundbreaking 1973 Aloha from Hawaii via satellite concert special was broadcast live from the Honolulu International Center, now the Neil S. Blaisdell Center. This event was a massive global spectacle, touting Elvis's enduring star power and his deep connection to the islands. His generosity towards Hawaii was also notable. Back in 1961, he performed a benefit concert that raised over $64,000, a huge sum then, for the USS Arizona Memorial Fund at Pearl Harbor, significantly contributing to its completion. He felt a bond with the place and its people. Now, picture the Hawaii of the late 1960s and 1970s, besides Elvis bringing rock and roll royalty to its shores. Another iconic figure dominated the television landscape from the very same location, Jack Lord. As Detective Steve McGarrett, the stern, dedicated leader of the elite state police force in Hawaii, Fiva Lord became synonymous with the islands. The show, with its stunning scenery, catchy theme, tune, and Lord's signature command, Bukum Dano, was a massive international hit, running from 1968 to 1980. It painted a picture of Hawaii as a beautiful but sometimes dangerous paradise, and McGarrett was its unwavering protector. Given that both Elvis and Jack Lord were colossal stars who spent significant time in Hawaii during the same era, it seems almost inevitable that their paths would cross, and they did. While details aren't extensively documented like some of Elvis's other celebrity encounters, it's confirmed that the two men met. Elvis, known for his admiration of law enforcement figures, real and fictional, reportedly held respect for the tough-as-nails character Lord portrayed. Sources say Elvis visited the set of Hawaii 5-0 during one of his stays on the islands. Imagine the king walking onto the set where McGarrett strategized his latest bust. It's a meeting of two very different kinds of American icons, both inextricably linked to the allure of Hawaii. Lord, known for being intensely private and dedicated to his show, and Elvis, the flamboyant superstar, sharing a moment in the place they both, in their own ways, helped make famous worldwide. Elvis was known for his generosity, and often gave gifts to people he admired. While specifics regarding a gift to Lord aren't widely confirmed, it aligns with Elvis's character. Their connection decodes the magnetic pull of Hawaii for celebrities, and how these two towering figures of popular culture briefly shared the same tropical stage. Number 11. Rhinestones, Pianos, and Mutual Admiration in Vegas. Las Vegas, in the 1960s and 70s, was a galaxy of stars, but few shone brighter or with more flamboyance than Elvis, Presley, and Liberace. They were, in many ways, the kings of Vegas entertainment during their respective reigns. Elvis redefined the Vegas residency with his electrifying comeback performances at the International Hotel starting in 1969, packing showrooms with explosive energy, rock and roll hits, and his signature jumpsuits. Liberace, Mr. Showmanship, had already established himself decades earlier as the epitome of Vegas glitz, with his dazzling costumes, candelabra-topped pianos, and virtuosic, crowd-pleasing performances that blended classical music with pop standard. You might think their styles were worlds apart. Elvis, the rebellious rocker; Liberace, the classically trained pianist, dripping in sequins. But they shared more than just the Vegas spotlight. Both men understood the power of spectacle. Elvis's jumpsuits, capes, and flashy jewelry evolved throughout his Vegas years, becoming increasingly elaborate, a nod, perhaps conscious or unconscious, to the kind of over-the-top presentation Liberace had pioneered. Liberace, in turn, incorporated contemporary elements into his shows to keep them fresh. They were both masters of connecting with their audiences and creating an unforgettable live experience. Their connection wasn't just stylistic. They knew and admired each other. They reportedly first met in the mid-1950s when Elvis was just exploding onto the scene. Liberace, already a huge star, was known for spotting new talent and apparently offered the young Elvis some friendly career advice. Fast forward to their Vegas heydays, and their paths crossed again. They attended each other's shows. Imagine Liberace, famous for his own capes and sequins, watching Elvis command the stage in a rhinestone jumpsuit. He reportedly loved it. There are photos of them together backstage in Vegas, radiating star power. Elvis presented Liberace with a gold-plated cap gun, set a quirky gift typical of the king. Liberace gave Elvis a jeweled shirt or jacket, a fitting exchange between two men who embraced maximalism. They understood the pressure and the unique thrill of being the main attraction in the entertainment capital of the world. Their mutual respect stemmed from recognizing a fellow showman who knew how to deliver an unforgettable performance night after night under the bright lights of the Las Vegas Strip. It was a friendship built on shared ground in a town known for its dazzling, larger-than-life personalities. Number 10. The King and the Future, Mary Richards, Combe stars. Before she turned the world on with her smile, as Laura Petrie on The Dick Van Dyke Show, or broke ground as the independent single-career woman Mary Richards in The Mary Tyler Moore Show. Mary Tyler Moore was a young actress trying to make her mark. Elvis Presley, by the early 1960s, was already a global phenomenon, churning out musical films for Hollywood. Their paths crossed professionally on the set of the 1962 film Change of Habit. Well, almost. Actually, wait, that wasn't Change of Habit, 1969. That was later. Let's rewind. Mary Tyler Moore did work with Elvis, but it was in a different capacity, and much earlier, even before her Dick Van Dyke Show fame. It was for Elvis's 1961 film, Blue Hawaii. Wait, no, that's not right either. She wasn't in Blue Hawaii. Let's correct the record again. The film connection is often misremembered. The actual professional intersection wasn't a co-starring role, but something different. In 1957, a young Mary Tyler Moore, still largely unknown, appeared in a TV special called The Elvis Presley Show, which was actually the third and final appearance Elvis made on The Ed Sullivan Show that year, broadcast remotely from CBS Television City in Los Angeles. Moore was one of the dancers in a production number. So, while not acting opposite him in a narrative film, she shared the stage with the king during one of his most electrifying early television appearances, the very appearances that scandalized some and mesmerized millions. She was part of the spectacle surrounding Elvis's rise. Now, let's jump forward to Change of Habit, 1969. This film did star Mary Tyler Moore alongside Elvis. Here, Elvis played Dr. John Carpenter, a hip doctor running a clinic in an inner-city neighborhood. Mary Tyler Moore played Sister Michelle Gallagher, one of 3 nuns, alongside Jane Elliott and Barbara McNair, who go undercover in plain clothes to assist at the clinic and better understand the community. This film was Elvis's final acting role in a fictional feature film. It tackled more serious themes than many of his previous light-hearted musicals, dealing with issues like poverty, racism, and community health. Moore, by this time, was a well-established TV star, having completed her run on The Dick Van Dyke Show. The dynamic between Elvis's cool doctor character and Moore's earnest, questioning nun provided the film's core relationship. They even shared a potential romantic storyline, culminating in a scene where Sister Michelle must choose between her love for Dr. Carpenter and her commitment to the church. Reports from the set suggest a professional and cordial working relationship between Elvis and Moore. She was known for her professionalism, and Elvis, despite his massive fame, often aimed to be collegial with his co-stars. So the connection wasn't just a fleeting early career moment as a dancer. Mary Tyler Moore did indeed co-star with Elvis Presley in his last feature film, playing a significant role opposite the king himself, right before she launched her own iconic self-titled show. Number 9. The Kid Who Kicked the King and starred with him. This connection stretches way back, long before one became a beloved action and character actor, and the other was, well, he was already the king. In 1963, Elvis Presley starred in the musical film It Happened at the World's Fair. The plot involved Elvis as a crop-dusting pilot who ends up hitchhiking to the Seattle World's Fair with a young Chinese girl, eventually finding romance along the way. In one scene, Elvis's character, Mike Edwards, needs a way to get close to a nurse, played by Joan O'Brien, he's interested in. He sees a young boy and pays him a quarter to kick him in the shin, giving Mike an excuse to visit the nurse for treatment. That young boy, making one of his very first, albeit brief screen appearances, was none other than Kurt Russell. He was just a kid, around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Decades later, Russell would recall the experience fondly. He remembered Elvis being incredibly nice to him on set. Imagine being a child actor and your job for the day is to kick Elvis Presley. Russell has mentioned that Elvis seemed like a really nice guy during their brief interaction. It was a small part credited simply as Boy Who Kicks Mike, but it marked the first time the future Snake Plissken shared screen time with the king of rock and roll. But the connection didn't end there. Fast forward about 16 years. Elvis Presley tragically passed away in August 1977. Just 18 months later, in early 1979, a landmark television movie aired that brought the King's story back to life for millions. Titled simply Elvis, the film was a major event, directed by rising filmmaker John Carpenter. And who did Carpenter cast to play the demanding, iconic role of Elvis Presley himself? Kurt Russell. At this point, Russell was known primarily for his work in Disney films as a teenager and young adult, the computer wore tennis shoes, the strongest man in the world. Taking on the role of Elvis was a huge leap and a considerable risk. It required capturing not just the look, but the charisma. The voice, Russell's singing voice, was dubbed by country singer Ronnie McDowell, but Russell nailed the speaking voice and physicality, and the complex personality of one of the most famous figures of the 20th century. Russell threw himself into the role, delivering a performance that was widely acclaimed by critics and audiences alike. It earned him an Emmy nomination and is still considered one of the most definitive portrayals of Elvis ever filmed. It also marked a turning point in Russell's career, proving his dramatic range and paving the way for his transition into adult leading roles, including his iconic collaborations with John Carpenter, like Escape from New York and The Thing. So, the kid who kicked Elvis in a movie grew up to become Elvis in a highly successful biopic, bringing their connection full circle in a truly unique Hollywood story. Kurt Russell's father, Bing Russell, also had a connection. He appeared in small roles in a few Elvis movies himself. Number 8. A Hollywood romance that never quite bloomed. Natalie Wood was Hollywood royalty from a young age, a child star who transitioned into complex adult roles in iconic films like Rebel Without a Cause and West Side Story. Elvis Presley was of course the music sensation who had also taken Hollywood by storm. In the mid-1950s, specifically around 1956, when Elvis's fame was exploding and Natalie was navigating her late teens as an established actress, their paths crossed. The story goes that they were set up on a date possibly orchestrated by the studio or mutual acquaintances, a common practice in Hollywood at the time. Elvis, then around 21, flew Natalie Wood out to Memphis to meet his family at his home on Audubon Drive. This was before Graceland. Imagine that scene. The burgeoning king of rock and roll, bringing one of Hollywood's most beautiful and famous young actresses home to meet his parents, Vernon and Gladys Presley. Accounts suggest Gladys was quite taken with Natalie, perhaps seeing her as a suitable match for her famous son. They were photographed together during this visit, looking every bit the glamorous young couple. They went on movie dates, rode motorcycles, typical activities for young people in love, albeit under the intense scrutiny of the press. However, the romance, if it truly was one, seemed to fizzle out relatively quickly. Various reasons have been suggested over the years. Some accounts claim Natalie was perhaps overwhelmed by Elvis's intense fame and the passionate devotion of his fans, which was already reaching fever pitch. Memphis was a world away from the Hollywood sets she was accustomed to. Others suggest that Elvis, deeply attached to his mother, may not have pursued the relationship seriously if he sensed Gladys wasn't entirely approving long-term, or perhaps he was simply more focused on his skyrocketing career. Natalie herself reportedly later described Elvis as rather provincial, and found the Memphis scene, including Elvis's entourage, the early Memphis Mafia, not to her sophisticated Hollywood taste. She allegedly told her sister Lana that dating Elvis was exciting initially, but didn't seem to have long-term potential for her. Elvis, for his part, was linked to many beautiful women during this period. Their reported relationship seems to have been more of a brief, heavily publicized encounter between two massive young stars than a deep, lasting connection. It remains a fascinating what-if footnote in the lives of two legends who briefly orbited each other's dazzlingly bright stars in the heady days of the 1950s. Number 7. The Chairman and the King. Rivals or respectful peers. Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley represented two distinct eras of American popular music, and two different images of the male superstar. Sinatra, the chairman of the board, was the smooth, sophisticated crooner who came up through the big band era, embodying classic, cool, and commanding respect with his impeccable phrasing and stage presence. Elvis was the raw, rebellious energy of rock and roll, the hip-swiveling sensation who scandalized the establishment and thrilled a new generation. In the late 1950s, as Elvis's star ascended, Sinatra famously made some disparaging remarks about rock and roll music, calling it deplorable, a rancid-smelling aphrodisiac, and criticizing its cretinous goons. He seemed to view it as a threat to the kind of music he represented. Elvis, ever polite, publicly reportedly didn't hold a grudge, understanding it might be a generational or stylistic clash. He always spoke respectfully of Sinatra's talent. Things shifted significantly when Elvis returned from his army service in Germany in 1960. Sinatra, perhaps recognizing Elvis's enduring popularity and seeing a business opportunity, or maybe having softened his stance, hosted a major television special to welcome Elvis home. Titled Welcome Home Elvis, it aired as part of the Frank Sinatra Timex show. This was a huge symbolic gesture. The special featured Elvis, looking sharp in his civilian clothes, though still sporting his army haircut, performing several songs. The highlight for many was the moment the two icons shared the stage. They performed a medley, playfully swapping styles. Sinatra sang a swinging version of Elvis's Love Me Tender, and Elvis returned the favor with a rock-infused take on Sinatra's Witchcraft. It was a fascinating juxtaposition, the old guard and the new king acknowledging each other's territory. The show was a ratings smash and signaled a level of mutual acceptance, at least publicly. Their paths continued to cross, especially during their respective reigns in Las Vegas in the late 60s and 70s. Both held court at different hotels, drawing massive crowds. While they ran in different circles, Sinatra, with his Rat Pack remnants, Elvis, with his Memphis Mafia, reports suggest a level of professional respect developed. They occasionally attended each other's shows. Elvis reportedly sent Sinatra flowers or telegrams for opening nights. Sinatra, despite his earlier comments, likely couldn't deny Elvis's sheer talent and stage magnetism. There were even rumors, though likely unfounded, that Sinatra once offered Elvis a role in the original Ocean's 11 movie, which ultimately didn't happen. While perhaps never close friends, the relationship between Sinatra and Elvis evolved from perceived rivalry to a kind of wary, respectful coexistence between two of the biggest stars the entertainment world has ever known, cemented by that iconic TV special. Number 6. Vegas vibes, jewels, and a shared stage with Mr. Entertainment. Sammy Davis Jr. was the consummate entertainer, singer, dancer, actor, impressionist, musician. A vital member of the legendary Rat Pack alongside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin Davis, Jr. broke racial barriers and captivated audiences and energy. Like Elvis, he became a fixture in Las Vegas, known for his dynamic performances and showmanship. Elvis and Sammy moved in overlapping circles, especially in the vibrant atmosphere of 1960s and 70s Las Vegas. Both were headliners, drawing huge crowds to the showrooms of major hotels like the International, where Elvis performed, and the Sands or Caesar's Palace, frequent haunts for Davis Jr. They shared a mutual admiration. Elvis respected Sammy's immense talent and groundbreaking career. Sammy, in turn, was reportedly fascinated by Elvis's unique charisma and the intense devotion he inspired. Their connection became visible through their interactions. They attended each other's shows when schedules permitted. Imagine the electricity in the room when Elvis Presley was in the audience for a Sammy Davis Jr. performance, or vice versa. These were nights when Vegas truly lived up to its reputation as the entertainment capital. There are well-known photographs capturing them together backstage, often at the International Hotel during Elvis's engagements. One famous picture shows Elvis, Sammy Davis Jr., and singer Jan Murray laughing together. Another captures a warm embrace between the King and Mr. Entertainment. These weren't just posed publicity shots. They seemed to reflect a genuine rapport. Elvis, known for his spontaneous generosity, especially towards fellow performers, he reportedly gifted Sammy Davis Jr. jewelry, a common practice for the King. Given Sammy's own penchant for flashy rings and chains, it's easy to picture him appreciating such a gift from Elvis. Their shared experience as pioneering entertainers who commanded the demanding Vegas stage created a bond. Both understood the pressures and the triumphs of headlining in that unique, high-stakes environment. Furthermore, Sammy Davis Jr. actually appeared on stage with Elvis during one of Elvis's performances at the International Hotel in August 1970. During the midnight show, Elvis brought Sammy up from the audience. Sammy did a quick impression of Elvis, much to the crowd's delight, promoting the playful respect between the two stars. This shared moment on stage highlights their camaraderie and mutual professional esteem, a connection forged under the bright lights of the Las Vegas Strip between two unparalleled showmen. Number 5. When the King Met Gods from Across the Pond. By the early 1970s, Elvis Presley was the established king of rock and roll, a living legend still performing powerful shows, particularly in Las Vegas. Meanwhile, a new generation of rock royalty was conquering the globe: Led Zeppelin. With their heavy blues rock, sound mystical lyrics, and legendary stage presence, Robert Plant, Jimmy Page, John Paul Jones, and John Bonham were arguably the biggest band in the world. It might seem like these two musical empires existed in different universes. Elvis, the polished Vegas headliner rooted in 50s rock and gospel. Led Zeppelin, the architects of 70s hard rock and stadium anthems. But the members of Led Zeppelin, particularly Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, revered Elvis. They grew up on his music. He was a foundational influence. Jimmy Page has spoken about the impact of hearing early Elvis records, and Robert Plant often incorporated Elvis mannerisms and vocal stylings into his own performances. Getting to meet their idol was a dream, and it happened twice. The first meeting reportedly occurred in November 1970. Led Zeppelin were in Los Angeles, and through intermediaries connected to the music scene, arrangements were made for them to attend one of Elvis's shows. Likely not in Vegas this time, perhaps a tour date. They met him backstage afterwards. Accounts suggest this first meeting was slightly formal, perhaps a bit awestruck on Zeppelin's part. The more famous encounter took place a few years later, likely in 1974. Led Zeppelin were again in Los Angeles, staying at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Elvis was also in town. This time, the meeting was more relaxed and extended, reportedly happening at Elvis's rented house in Bel Air. According to accounts from Zeppelin members and Elvis's entourage, like bodyguard Sonny West and friend Jerry Schilling, the atmosphere was initially a bit reserved. Elvis was apparently sitting in a large chair, surrounded by his guys. Led Zeppelin, despite their own massive fame, were still somewhat intimidated in the presence of the king. Then, the ice broke. Jerry Schilling recalled that Elvis admired a flashy watch John Paul Jones was wearing. To break the silence, Schilling suggested Elvis show the band his collection of police badges. Elvis was an avid collector and honorary officer for several departments. This seemed to loosen things up. They started talking about music, performing, and the craziness of life on the road. At one point, Elvis playfully offered to trade his Lincoln Continental for a piece of jewelry Jimmy Page was wearing. Some accounts say it was an Afghan coat. Page, starstruck, apparently almost agreed before realizing Elvis was likely joking. Robert Plant reportedly sang snippets of Elvis songs. There's a story often repeated that Elvis picked up a guitar and started playing, maybe a bit of Promised Land. The mood became much friendlier, a mutual respect session between the reigning king and the heirs apparent to the rock throne. Led Zeppelin left buzzing, having spent real time with their hero. Elvis reportedly enjoyed meeting the young rockers too, impressed by their success and perhaps seeing a reflection of his own youthful energy. It was a rare summit meeting between two generations of rock royalty. Number 4. The King of Rock and Roll and the Dragon's Haired Karat Obsession. Elvis Presley's fascination with martial arts, particularly karate, is well documented. It began during his army service in Germany in the late 1950s and became a lifelong passion. He trained seriously, eventually earning multiple black belts. His primary instructor in the U.S. was Memphis-based Master Kang Rhee, but he also trained under others, including the influential Ed Parker. Karate wasn't just a hobby for Elvis. He incorporated its stances, strikes, and disciplined movements into his stage performances, especially during his dynamic Las Vegas shows and the Aloha from Hawaii special. It added a new layer of physicality and visual drama to his act. He saw it as both a form of physical fitness and a spiritual discipline. Bruce Lee, the Dragon, was of course the global martial arts phenomenon. Through his ground-reigning films, like Fist of Fury, Way of the Dragon, and especially the posthumously released Enter the Dragon 1973, Lee revolutionized martial arts cinema and brought disciplines like Kung Fu and his own hybrid philosophy, Jeet Kune. His speed, power, charisma, and philosophy made him an international icon. Given their shared intense interest in martial arts during the same era, particularly in the late 60s and early 70s, and their connections within the martial arts community, did their paths cross. The connection point is often cited as Ed Parker, a prominent American Kenpo karate grandmaster who founded the Long Beach International Karate Champions. Ed Parker knew both men well. He was a longtime friend and karate instructor to Elvis, starting in the early 1960s. Parker was also instrumental in helping Bruce Lee gain exposure in the United States, inviting him to demonstrate his skills at the Long Beach Internationals in 1964 and 1967, performances that caught the eye of Hollywood producers. So, did Elvis and Bruce Lee ever meet? Perhaps through Ed Parker. Accounts differ, and definitive proof is elusive. Some members of Elvis's entourage and figures in the martial arts world have claimed that a brief meeting did occur, possibly at a martial arts demonstration or event where Parker was present. The story often involves a quick introduction and a respectful exchange. Elvis certainly knew of Bruce Lee, and reportedly admired his incredible skill and screen presence. He owned footage of Lee, possibly from the Long Beach demonstrations. Jerry Schilling, Elvis's friend, mentioned Elvis being impressed by Lee. However, other accounts, including from people close to Bruce Lee, suggest a face-to-face meeting never actually happened. Lee passed away suddenly in July 1973, just as his international fame was exploding with Enter the Dragon. Elvis himself passed away 4 years later. Whether they met personally or not, there was a definite connection through their shared passion and their mutual acquaintance, Ed Parker. Elvis respected Lee's mastery, and Lee reportedly acknowledged Elvis's genuine dedication to karate training, even if their styles and approaches differed. Furthermore, Mike Stone, a karate champion who famously had an affair with Priscilla Presley, was a student of Bruce Lee's and also knew Elvis through the martial arts tournament circuit, adding another layer to their interconnected world. It remains a tantalizing link between two unique cultural icons who mastered very different but equally electrifying forms of performance. Number 3. The King's Robe, for the greatest. Elvis Presley and Muhammad Ali were two of the most matic and globally recognized figures of the 20th century. Elvis, the king of rock and roll, revolutionized music and popular culture. Ali, the greatest, transcended boxing to become a symbol of athletic prowess, defiance, and social commentary. Both men possessed an electrifying presence that captivated millions. Their paths crossed thanks to their respective reigns in Las Vegas and a shared connection through the world of entertainment and sport. By the early 1970s, Elvis was deep into his Las Vegas residency era, while Ali was reclaiming his heavyweight title and preparing for some of his most iconic fights. Both were frequent visitors to the city that never sleeps. Well, almost. They knew of each other, naturally, and reportedly had a mutual admiration. Ali, like many, likely enjoyed Elvis's music and showmanship. Elvis, a fan of boxing and known for his respect for powerful athletes and performers, admired Ali's skill, confidence, and larger-than-life personality. Their most famous interaction occurred in February 1973. Muhammad Ali was scheduled to fight Joe Bugner in Las Vegas. Elvis, who was also performing in Vegas at the time at the Hilton, formerly the International Hotel, decided he wanted to give Ali a special gift to wish him luck. But this wasn't just any gift. Elvis commissioned a custom-made robe for Ali. And knowing Elvis's style and Ali's personality, it had to be spectacular. Elvis presented Ali with the robe packaged before the Bugner fight. It was a stunning white robe emblazoned across the back with the words, "People's Champion," in large, bold letters, heavily adorned with jewels, rhinestones, studs, possibly even semi-precious stones, reflecting Elvis's own flashy stage costumes. Estimates of the robe's cost at the time ranged, but figures around $3,000 to $10,000, a very significant amount in 1973, are often cited. Ali was reportedly thrilled and deeply touched by the gesture from the king. He famously wore the robe into the ring for the Joe Bugner fight, which he won by unanimous decision. Photos and footage of Ali sporting the Elvis-gifted robe became iconic images symbolizing a unique moment of connection between these two cultural giants. They met on other occasions as well, sometimes backshed at Elvis's shows. There are photos of them together shaking hands, smiling, two men at the absolute pinnacle of their respective fields, sharing a moment of mutual respect and understanding. Ali reportedly even visited Graceland after Elvis's death. The gift of the robe remains the most enduring symbol of their connection, a flamboyant gesture from the king of rock and roll to the self-proclaimed and often validated greatest of all time. Number 2. The King Wants a Gage, from Tricky Dick. This is perhaps one of the most surreal and well-documented encounters in Elvis Presley's life. On December 21, 1970, Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, showed up unannounced at the northwest gate of the White House in Washington, D.C. He hand-delivered a letter addressed to President Richard M. Nixon. In the 5-page, handwritten letter, penned on American Airlines stationery during his flight, Elvis expressed his deep patriotism, his concern about the growing drug culture, the hippie movement, and anti-American sentiment among youth. He stated his admiration for President Nixon and offered his services to help combat these issues. Specifically, Elvis requested to be made a federal agent at large for the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, BND, the precursor to the DEA. He believed his fame and credibility with young people could allow him to reach them in ways the government couldn't. He emphasized his ability to go right to the center of the problem, and mentioned he had been studying drug abuse and communist brainwashing techniques. He also noted he would be staying at the Washington Hotel under the alias John Burroughs, and included his phone number. White House aides Egil, Bud Krogh, and Dwight Chapin saw the potential public relations value and perhaps the sheer novelty of such a meeting. They quickly arranged for Elvis to meet President Nixon later that same day in the Oval Office. Elvis arrived dressed flamboyantly, wearing a purple velvet suit with a huge gold belt buckle and a matching cape along with sunglasses. He brought gifts for the president, a commemorative Colt .45 pistol mounted in a display case, which he had carried into the White House, causing some consternation for the Secret Service, until they confirmed it was a gift, and family photos. The meeting lasted about 30 minutes. According to Krogh's detailed memo and official White House photographs, which are now among the most requested items from the National Archives, the conversation was cordial, if somewhat bizarre. Elvis reiterated his desire to help fight drug use, showing Nixon honorary police badges he had collected from various law enforcement agencies. He spoke earnestly about his patriotism and his concerns for the country. He reportedly criticized the Beatles, claiming they were a negative influence and had made their money outside the U.S. before criticizing it. Nixon, somewhat bemused but recognizing the cultural significance of his visitor, listened politely. He expressed appreciation for Elvis's support and his offer to help. Crucially for Elvis, Nixon agreed to grant his request. He instructed Bud Krogh to arrange for Elvis to receive an honorary BNDD badge. Although largely symbolic and granting no actual law enforcement authority, obtaining this federal badge was clearly deeply important to Elvis. Photos capture the moment Elvis beams with pride as Nixon presents him with the badge. They also show Elvis, in a spontaneous gesture, putting his arm around the president and even briefly demonstrating a karate move. The meeting concluded with handshakes and photos. Elvis left the White House thrilled, having achieved his goal. The unlikely summit between the King of Rock and Roll and the President of the United States remained secret for over a year, until the Washington Post broke the story, revealing one of the strangest and most fascinating encounters ever to take place in the Oval Office. Number 1. When the Fab Four met their idol, and it was awkward. For the Beatles, John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, Elvis Presley wasn't just a star. He was the catalyst. His explosive arrival in the mid-1950s was a primary inspiration for them, as it was for countless other young musicians in Britain and around the world. Hearing Elvis's early records, seeing his rebellious energy, changed everything. They idolized him. John Lennon famously said, "Before Elvis, there was nothing." Paul McCartney bought his first guitar after being inspired by Elvis. Meeting him was the ultimate goal. By August 1965, the Beatles were arguably the biggest band on the planet in the midst of their own whirlwind of global fame known as Beatlemania. They were on tour in the United States and staying in Los Angeles. Elvis was also in LA, taking a break from filming movies at his home in Perugia Way, Bel Air. Through intermediaries, likely involving journalist Chris Hutchins and Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, arrangements were finally made for the two musical superpowers to meet. The anticipation was immense on the Beatles' side. On the evening of August 27, 1965, the Beatles and their entourage, including manager Brian Epstein, were driven up to Elvis's Bel Air mansion. When they were ushered into the large living room, where Elvis was waiting with his Memphis Mafia, the initial atmosphere was surprisingly awkward. Reports from both camps describe a period of near silence. The Beatles, usually witty and boisterous, were completely starstruck, almost reverently quiet in the presence of their hero. Elvis, perhaps unsure how to react to these four young men who had conquered the world in his wake, was also reportedly subdued initially. John Lennon later recalled, "It was very embarrassing because we were visiting Elvis and he didn't say anything." To break the ice, Elvis apparently quipped something like, "If you guys are just going to sit there and stare at me, I'm going to bed." This seemed to work. Someone, possibly Elvis himself, suggested they jam together. Guitars were brought out. Elvis played bass, a Fender Precision bass that Paul McCartney, usually a bassist, picked up and marveled at, while John and George played guitars alongside him. Paul may have played piano later. Ringo, lacking drums, reportedly resorted to tapping out rhythms on furniture. They played some rock and roll standards, possibly Chuck Berry tunes, maybe even one or two of Elvis's own earlier hits. The exact playlist is lost to history, as no recordings were made. Colonel Parker reportedly forbade photos and recordings. The mood lightened considerably as they played music together. They talked about their careers, the pressures of fame, guitars, and music. Elvis reportedly showed them his remote control for the TV, a novelty then, and they played pool together. The meeting lasted for several hours. While it wasn't necessarily the deep earth-shattering conversation some might have imagined, it was a significant moment. The passing of a torch, perhaps, or at least a mutual acknowledgement between the originator and his most successful successors. The Beatles left feeling thrilled to have finally met the king, even if the encounter started awkwardly. Elvis, according to his friends, enjoyed the meeting too, finding the Beatles to be polite and respectful young men. It was the only time Elvis and the Beatles ever met, a unique summit in rock and roll history where the idols finally came face to face with their own idol,